Hello and welcome. In this particular video, we will be dealing with the topic of Charters Act of 1853. This was the last among the series of Charter Act passed by British Parliament between 1773 to 1853. Some of the features of this act are as follows. For the first time, it separated the legislative and executive function of the Governor General's Council. Also, it provided for addition of six new members called as Legislative Councillor to the Council. Therefore, it established a separate Governor General's Council, Legislative Council, which came to be known as Indian Legislative Council or Central Legislative Council. This legislative wing of the council functioned as a mini parliament, adopting the procedure similar to the British Parliament. For the first time, legislation was treated as an equal function of the government, requiring special machinery and special process. It introduced an open competition system for selection and recruitment of civil servants. The civil service was thus open to Indians also. The Macaulay Committee on Civil Services in the year 1854 was appointed. According to this act, it extended the rule of East India Company over Indian territories and allowed it to retain their possession on trust of British Crown. For the first time, it introduced local representation in the Indian Legislative Council. So here in this particular act, local representation for the first time was introduced. Of the six new legislative members of the Governor General's Council, 4 members were to be appointed by the local government of Bombay, Madras, Bengal, and Agra. Moving forward, we will deal with the Government of India Act 1858. This significant act was enacted after the revolt of 1857. This act is known as the Act of Good Government of India. It abolished the rule of East India Company and transferred the power of government, revenue and territory to British Crown. So the Government of India Act of 1858 or the Act of Good Government of India abolished the rule of East India Company. Some of the features of these act include it provided that from now onwards India was to be governed in the name of Her Majesty. It led to the change of the designation of Governor General of Bengal to Viceroy of Bengal. And first such Viceroy was Lord Canning. Viceroy was direct representative of British Crown in India, and Lord Canning became the first Viceroy of India. It abolished the system of dual government or double government by scrapping the Board of Control and Court of Directorate. It abolished the double government by scrapping Board of Control and Court of Directorate. It created the new office of Secretary of State for India, vested with complete control and authority over Indian administration. The Secretary of the State was the member of British Cabinet and was ultimately responsible for British Parliament. It established a 15-member Council of India to assist the Secretary of State of India. And this council was advisory body with Secretary of the State as its chairman. So here a 15-member council was created. This was mainly to assist Secretary of State and was advisory in nature. The provision of the Act of 1858 were largely confined to the process of improving the administrative machinery. By which the Indian government was to be supervised and controlled in England. It did not substantially alter the way the system of the government which was prevailed in India. So moving forward, we will deal with the few Indian Council Acts. Indian Council Acts 1861, 1892 and 1909. After the revolt of 1857, the British government felt the need of seeking the cooperation of Association of Indians in the administration of their country. With regard to this policy of association, 3 acts were enacted by British Parliament, which are 1861, 1892 and 1909 respectively. So now we'll talk about the features of Government of India Act or Indian Council Act of 1861. It made a beginning of representative institution. So Indian Council Act of 1861, it began the process of representative institution by associating Indians in the process of lawmaking. It provided for nomination of some Indians by Viceroy as non-official member of his expanded council. In 1862, Lord Canning, the then Viceroy, nominated 3 Indians to the Legislative Council, which were the Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinkar Rao. It restored the power of legislation to Madras and Bombay Presidency. So the power of legislation was restored to Madras and Bombay Presidency, and therefore reversed the centralizing tendency that had started from the Regulating Act of 1773 and reached its climax under Charters Act of 1833. This policy of legislative devolution continued till the grant of almost complete internal autonomy to provinces in 1937. So this policy of legislation of devolution continued till the grant of complete internal autonomy to the provinces in the year 1937. It also provided for establishment of new legislative council. So it also provided for new legislative council for Bengal, North West Frontier Province and Punjab. In the year 1862, in the year 1866 and the year 1897 respectively, it gave power to Viceroy. It gave power to Viceroy to issue ordinance. It gave power to Viceroy to issue ordinance without the concurrence of Legislative Council. So here importance is without concurrence of Legislative Council during an emergency, and the life of such ordinance was 6 months. So the life of such ordinance was 6 months. Portfolio system was introduced by Lord Canning. Portfolio system was introduced by Canning in year 1859. Under the system, a member of Viceroy's Council was made in charge of one or more department of government and was authorized to issue final orders on behalf of Council on matter of his department. Now moving forward, we will start with the next act, that is Indian Council Act of 1892. And we'll start with the features of the act. It increased the number of additional or non-official members in central and provincial legislative council but maintained the official majority with Britisher. So official majority was with Britisher, but in central and provincial legislative council the strengths of non-officials were increased. It increased the function of legislative council and gave them power to discuss budget. So here the budget discussion, the power to discuss budget was given and address question to the executive. It provided for the nomination of some non-official member to the Central Legislative Council and Provincial Legislative Council. To the Central Legislative Council by Viceroy based on the recommendation of Provincial Council and the Bengal Chamber of Commerce, and Provincial Legislative Council by governors on the recommendation of municipalities, district board, universities, trade association and zamindars. So here nomination was provided in Central Legislative Council and Provincial Legislative Council. Here governor would do that and here Viceroy. But the recommendation used to come from Provincial Legislative Council and Bengal Chamber of Commerce. And for the Provincial Legislative Council, the nomination used to come from municipality, district board, university, trade association, zamindars and chambers. This act made a limited and indirect provision for the use of election in order to fill up some of the non-official seats. However, the word election not used. The process was described as nomination. Now we will move to the Indian Council Act of 1909, which is also called as Morley Minto Reform. Morley was Secretary of State and Minto was Viceroy. It increased the size of Legislative Council considerably, both in central and provincial. So here the Legislative Council, both at central and provincial, the strength was improved. This was basically to pacify the moderates and create the rift or widen the rift which was already created by Surat split in Congress. The number was raised from 16 to 60 members in the Central Legislative Council. The number of members in the Provincial Legislative Council was not uniform. It retained official majority in Central Legislative Council but permitted Provincial Legislative Council to have non-official majority. So the number were raised from 16 to 60 members in Central Legislative Council, but when it comes to Provincial Legislative Council, the number of members were not fixed. They retained the official majority in the Central Legislative Council but permitted the Provincial Legislative Council to have a non-official majority. It expanded the deliberative function of Legislative Council at both levels. For example, members were allowed to move resolution on the budget, ask supplementary questions, and so on. For the first time, it provided for the association of Indians with Executive Council. So the Indian Council Act of 1909 was the first act where Indians were provided with for the association of Indians with Executive Council of Viceroy and Governor. S.P. Sinha or Satyendra Prakash Sinha became first Indian to join the Viceroy's Executive Council as law member. Became the first Indian to join the Executive Council of Viceroy as a law member. It introduced a system of communal representation for Muslims. So communal representation to Muslims was provided, and there was a concept of separate electorate. Separate electorate was provided. Under this system, Muslim members were to be elected only by Muslim voters. This particular act legalizes communalism, and Lord Minto came to be renowned as the father of communal electorate. So Lord Minto came to be renowned as father of communal electorate. It also provided for separate representation of chambers of commerce, presidency corporation, university, and zamindar. So separate representation of chamber of commerce, presidency corporation, university, and zamindars. So there was a pattern of divide and rule, if you can see here. The next act is Government of India Act 1919. Government of India Act 1919. The act is known as Montagu-Chelmsford Reform. Montagu-Chelmsford Reform. For the first time, on August 20th, 1917, British government declared that their objective was the gradual introduction of responsible government in India. Hence, Government of India Act of 1990 was enacted, and it came into force in the year 1921. Montagu was the Secretary of State and Chelmsford was Viceroy of India. We'll talk about some of the features of Government of India Act 1990. It diluted the central control over provinces by demarcating and separating central and provincial subjects. Therefore, the central and provincial legislatures were authorized to make law on their respective list of subjects. However, the structure of government continued to be unitary and centralized. Unitary and centralized. It also divided the provincial subject into two parts. First was transferred and the second was reserved. The transferred subjects were to be administered by governor with the aid of minister, who were responsible to Legislative Council. The reserved subjects were to be administered by governor and his executive council without being responsible to Legislative Council. This dual system of government came to be known as diarchy or diarchy. This dual scheme of government came to be known as diarchy. But this particular experiment was largely unsuccessful. For the first time, it introduced bicameralism and direct election. In the country. Therefore, the bicameral legislature consisting of an upper house, that is Council of State, and lower house, that is Legislative Assembly, replaced Indian Legislative Council. So Indian Legislative Council was replaced by an upper house and a lower house. This happened in the Government of India Act 1919. The majority of members of both the houses were selected through direct election. So the majority now were selected or were elected through direct election. It required that 3 of the 6 members of Viceroy's Executive Council, except Commander-in-Chief, were to be Indian. So 3 out of 6 were to be Indian. It required that 3 of 6 members of Viceroy's Executive Council were to be Indian, except Viceroy and Commander-in-Chief. It extended the principle of communal representation. It extended the principle of communal representation to Indian Christians, Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, and Europeans. So the process of divide and rule continues still here. The franchise was granted to the limited number of people. So the franchise was limited, which was based on property, tax, education. It led to the creation of new office of High Commissioner for India in London, and transferred him some of the function that were at this particular time performed by Secretary of State of India. It led to the establishment of Public Service Commission. So here a Public Service Commission, there was a provision of establishment of Public Service Commission, and hence a Public Service Commission was set up in the year 1926 with the purpose of recruiting civil servants. For the first time, it separated provincial budget from central budget. So for the first time, the provincial budget was separated from the central budget and authorized the provincial legislature to enact their own budget. Its provision led to the appointment of statutory commission. So here there was a provision of a statutory commission to inquire into and report on its working after 10 years on its enforcement. The statutory commission came to be known as Simon Commission. Simon being the chairman of the council of the commission. The British government announced the appointment of 7-member statutory commission under the chairmanship of Sir John Simon to report on the condition of India under its new constitution. All parties boycotted the commission because all members of the commission were British and there was no Indian representation. 2 years ahead of the schedule, on 1927, it came to India. The commission submitted its report in the year 1930 and recommended following. So now we'll study the recommendation of Simon Commission. So first Simon talked about is abolishing diarchy, extension of responsible government in the provinces, establishment of Federation of British India and Princely State, and continuation of communal electorate, and so on. So extension of responsible government in province, establishment of Federation of British India and Princely State, and continuation of communal electorate, and continuation of communal electorate, and so on. In order to consider the proposal of commission, the British government convened 3 round table conference of the representatives of British India, Indian princely states, and the government. Based on these discussions, a white paper of constitutional reform was prepared and submitted for the consideration of Joint Select Committee of British Parliament. The recommendation of these committee were incorporated with certain changes in the next Government of India Act 1935. So the white paper on constitutional reform will see that the recommendation of these committee was incorporated in the year 1935 of the Government of India Act 1935. Moving forward, we'll study the Government of India Act 1935. Government of India Act 1935. This act was second milestone towards complete responsible government in India. It was detailed and lengthy document having 321 section, 321 section and 10 schedules. This act came into effect in 1935 and was discontinued in the year 1939. So it came into effect in 1937 and it was discontinued in the year 1939. We'll discuss about some of the features of this act, which include it provided for the establishment of All India Federation consisting of provinces and princely states as the unit of federation, but the federation never came into existence, as the princely state did not join it. Government of India Act 1935 divided the powers among center and the units in terms of three lists. There was a federal list that was for central and 59 items were kept here. Then there were provincial list. This was for the province and 54 items were kept with the province, and concurrent list. This was for both and 36 items were placed here. And the residuary power, this is important here. Residuary power was given to Viceroy. Residuary power was given to Viceroy. It abolished the diarchy. And introduced the provincial government. Introduced provincial autonomy. As per the concept of provincial autonomy, the provinces were allowed to act as autonomous unit of administration in their defined sphere. Moreover, the act led to the introduction of responsible government in the province. That is, the governor was required to act according to the advice of minister responsible to the provincial legislature. It provided for the adoption of diarchy at center and therefore the federal subject was divided into reserved subject and transferred subject. So now here we'll see that the diarchy at the center was adopted, and therefore the federal subjects were divided into reserved subject and transferred subjects. However, this particular provision of act was not operationalized at all. It introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. So bicameralism was introduced in 6 out of 11 provinces. So it was not introduced in whole of the province, it was only in 6 out of 11 provinces. The provinces include Bengal, Bihar, Bombay, Madras, Assam, and United Province were made bicameral, consisting of legislative council, that is upper house, and legislative assembly, which is lower house. It further extended the principle of communal representation, to women, depressed class, and labor. It abolished the Council of India. It abolished Council of India, which was established by the Government of India Act 1858. The Secretary of State for India was now provided with a team of advisor. So the office of Council of India was abolished, but the SOS, that is Secretary of State, it continues. It extended the franchisee, and about 10% of the total population of India got right to vote. So 10% of population of India got the power to vote. It provided for establishment of Reserve Bank of India. So RBI was, in order to control the currency and credit in the country. It provided for establishment of both Federal Public Service Commission, and Provincial Public Service Commission and Joint Public Service Commission of 2 or more provinces. The Federal Court in 1937 was established. Concluding this topic, the Indian Independence Act of 1947 on February 20th, 1947, Clement Attlee, the British Prime Minister, declared that British rule in India would end by June 30, 1948, after which the power would be transferred to responsible Indian hands. Following which there was a widespread agitation by Muslim League demanding partition of the country. Again, on June 3rd, 1947, British government reiterated that any constitution framed by Constituent Assembly of India cannot be applied to those parts of the country which are unwilling to accept it. On the same day, that is 3rd June 1947, Lord Mountbatten proposed a partition plan called as Mountbatten Plan. This plan was accepted. This was accepted by both Congress and Muslim League. And Indian Independence Act of 1947 gave immediate effect to the plan. Now we'll talk about some of the features of this plan. It led to the end of British rule in India, and India was declared as independent and sovereign state from 15 August 1947. It provided for partition of India and created two independent dominions of India and Pakistan. They were provided right to secede from British Commonwealth. Right to secede from Commonwealth. British Commonwealth. It abolished the office of Viceroy. So here Viceroy's office is now finally abolished, and provided a Governor General for each dominion appointed by the British Queen on the advice of Dominion Cabinet. Government of Britain would have no responsibility with respect to Government of India or Pakistan. Constituent assemblies of two dominions were empowered to frame and adopt any constitution for their respective nation and to modify or repeal any act of British Parliament, including Independence Act itself. Constituent assembly of both the dominion were empowered to frame laws for their respective territories till the new constitution were drafted and enforced. No act of British Parliament passed after August 15 would extend either of the two dominions. It abolished the office of Secretary of State. So office of Secretary of State is also abolished here, and it proclaimed the end of British paramountcy over Indian princely state. It also granted freedom to princely state of India either to join Dominion of India or Dominion of Pakistan or to remain independent. It provided for the governance of each of the dominion and the provinces according to the Government of India Act 1935 until new constitution was framed and dominion were however authorized to make modification to the particular act. It deprived the British monarch of his right to veto bill. So there was a right to veto a bill. So this was denied to the British monarch. But this right was given to Governor General and he would have full power to assent to any bill in the name of His Majesty. It designated Governor General of India and the provincial governor as constitutional head of the state. They were bound to act on the advice of respective council of ministers in all matter. It dropped the title of Emperor of India from the list of royal titles of the King of England, and it continued the appointment of civil services and reservation of post of the Secretary of State of India. The member of civil services appointed before August 15, 1947 would still continue to enjoy all the benefits that they were entitled to till that time. And at the stroke of midnight on 15th August, the British rule ended and power was transferred to the two new dominions of India and Pakistan. Lord Mountbatten became the first Governor General of New Dominion of India. Mountbatten swore in Jawaharlal Nehru as first Prime Minister of independent India, and the Constituent Assembly of India was formed in year 1946, now became Parliament of Indian Dominion. So in this particular video, we talked about the various acts starting from the Regulating Act 1773 right till Indian Independence Act of 1947. These video session or this particular lecture will be very important for definitely UPSC, but CAPF, CDS, NDA and any other exam which ask general studies or general knowledge. So this section of polity is very important, from where the question directly comes from the act, and we have written down the points which are important. My request to the students is that they should go through the lecture once or more if they want, but most importantly write down the points which I have written, so that they will be very beneficial for each and every student for the quick revision. So thank you. In the next video we will meet with the Constituent Assembly and we will resume from that lecture. Have a great time. Thank you.